This is something I'm doing all the time. All the time. Everything that I say, I always try to package it in some kind of story format. Why? Because human beings were wired to learn through stories. All of you here, you will remember a story over a point. Why is that? Because there is an emotional component to a story. Logical points, we forget them. It's just logical, it's just mental. If you associate it to a certain story, it clicks. This is how we've been learning forever. People pass down lessons through stories, through generations. Everything is about stories. Everyone, stop waiting to take action. You got to give yourself permission to take action now. That's the point. Say you saw a little video just saying that. You're like, oh, cool, okay, I guess I'm waiting. I should give myself permission to take action, right? Cool. You'll probably forget it in 2 seconds. But what if I combine this exact same point this way? A lot of people are waiting to take action. We're conditioned this way. Look at any movie, any Disney movie, or even superhero movies. Think of Marvel, Spider-Man, right? We see this, we see Peter Parker. Before being Spider-Man, what is he? Some shy, quiet nerd. And then one day, what happens? A spider bites him. And when the spider bites him, everything changes. His life changes, and he taps into Spider-Man, living his dream, a superhero. And we see that, and we're inspired. But how does it condition us? We're now just waiting, just like Peter, looking for spiders. When's that spider gonna bite me? Any spiders around here? Come on, spiders, another day of waiting. Spider, where are you? Spider! Hey, that spider's not coming to bite you. You want to be Spider-Man? Bite yourself. Take your hand, give it a gentle nibble. Don't rip it off, a gentle nibble. And give yourself permission to be Spider-Man. Same exact point. No? Stop waiting, give yourself permission, take action. One's just the concept, okay. The other one's packaged in this Spider-Man story. You're going to remember it. You remember the Spider-Man story. It makes the point hit home because there's an emotional component to it. So even in teaching, it's stories. Conversation skills, talking to friends, it's stories. Your brand as a person, it's a story. Everything is stories. Here's another example. There is someone out there who will love you and accept you for you, no matter who you are, no matter what you're into. You might think that's not true. You're like, who would ever love me? I'm too weird, I'm too damaged, I'm too broken. No, no, no. There's someone out there who will love you and accept everything that is you. There's the concept. Like, oh, thanks, Julian. You just have to have faith. Thanks, appreciate it. There's the concept. What if we package it in a story? Here's the story. This is a true story. It's the story of Mr. Hands. You might have heard me talk about this one before. Mr. Hands was someone who lived in Washington State. I believe he worked at Boeing in Seattle. Smart guy, good job, good life situation. I believe he even had a good rep at the time. But Mr. Hands, that's his son who just walked by. Mr. Hands had a weird fetish. Now, when I say weird fetish, you're probably thinking, who doesn't? Come on. But his was exceptionally weird. His fetish was, every now and then, he liked driving up. He had a little ranch up north outside of Seattle. And he liked driving up there. And his fetish was just going out to the ranch, relaxing, the fresh air, and then occasionally getting fucked by a horse or a bull. True story. That was his thing. Just every now and then, just come on, like maybe a bull day, sometimes it's a horse day. And he loved doing that, Mr. Hands. You can Google it. But something about his fetish was missing. And he was like, you know what, I like this, but it'd be a much more pleasant experience if I could share it with friends. So he went out and found 10 to 12 other people who'd go up with him up to his ranch, and they'd all get fucked by horses and bulls. Just like deep, just going ham. And that went on for some time, until one day, Mr. Hands got fucked a little too hard. His favorite stallion got a little too excited, and there was a breach. And some blood started dripping from his anus. A few drops at first, a little bit of shit, and then it started gushing out. Friends were freaking out. Oh man, what do we do? So they rush him to the hospital. Now, they're not going to go into the hospital because then everyone's going to find out about what they've been doing. So they pull up, they dump him out of the car and drive off. And he's just lying there with his bleeding ass, like, help! They rush him into the hospital. They try to save him, but he dies. True story, he's dead. Fucked by his horse. So that's the story. Now, why is this a very disturbing, messed up, but yet very inspirational tale for all of us? It's a very inspiring story. It actually brings tingles to my heart, tears to my eyes. Because this relates to you if you're someone who has that fear that maybe no one out there is for me. Maybe no one out there will accept me for me, love me for me. You can come back to the Mr. Hand story, be inspired by it, and realize that if this person can go out and find 10 to 12 people to get fucked by horses and bulls, you can find one, just one person who will love you for you, no matter who you are. Like imagine the universe, God came to you and said, I will give you a challenge. And you're like, okay, universe, what's the challenge? You must succeed. Challenge 1, go find 10 to 12 people to get fucked by animals. Challenge 2, just find one who likes you for you. What's the easiest one? One. If he can do it, so can you. Okay? Now, notice, what's the point? The exact same point. Packaged in this story, you're probably never going to forget the Mr. Hand story. Especially such an extreme, graphic, emotional roller coaster type of story. Right? So, with everything, you want to start thinking in this story format. Okay? I do this with my teachings. Every point I'm saying, I'm always trying to link it to a story, a metaphor, a comparison. I'll even look back at my life at some of the crazy stories that happened to me, and you should do this as well. Become a person full of stories. And with every single story, what I do is I'm like, well, based upon this story here, which has a very deep, say, emotional impact, what are some lessons that people can learn from it? Packaging those lessons within the story, make the lessons click. Even if you think back to, say, myself, my content, my brand, sure, there's some ideas and teachings that come to mind, but a lot of it is story-based. You'll remember different stories, crazy things I might have said, my whole story, my brand, my journey, that's what resonates with you. So you got to harness the power of stories. Now, this can come down to your own story. It can come down to that. So looking back at your life, what are crazy stories? It can come down to someone else's story. And it can come down to a fictional story. You can make one up. Right? I do this a lot when I just say, so let's say, for example, you're blah, blah, blah. Technically, that's a made-up story. Let's just say you're really shy and, you see someone you think they're out of your league and you get stifled. Made-up story to illustrate a point. Get it? Same thing with Spider-Man. It's like, well, there's Spider-Man story, someone else's story. Oh, when I started out, I was so shy, I had anxiety around my own family. True story from my life. Everything is anchored in stories. Okay? You must learn how to gather this and then learn the components to what makes a good story. The first one is not starting out with the climax. You do have to start with what I call the juice, meaning don't just dilly-dally around with a build-up. There has to be tension throughout, but you can't start with the climax. Say we take the Mr. Hands story. How did it work? It's like, well, there's this guy, Mr. Hands, right? Washington State, worked at Boeing, so on and so forth, so you're thinking about that. And then it's like, well, he had this weird fetish. That's the first kind of hook climax. There's tension throughout. You're like, what's the fetish? Fucked by animals. Oh, gosh. But it gets worse. So it's different little climaxes throughout, especially nowadays where attention spans are lower than ever. You got to keep people engaged to be receptive to what it is that you're saying. So that was the first climax. The next one is he also likes sharing it with friends. Oh my God. His horse fucked him too hard. Oh, he started bleeding. Oh, they took him to the hospital. He died. but it's inspiring because twist, plot twist, and it links to you, epiphany. There's a whole roller coaster ride through it. Okay, you got to get good at this. Now, there are 3 key skills to master on top of this. One is structuring. Okay, structuring your story, meaning there's a million ways to say the exact same story. Structuring on a basic level means, well, what are the key components that come first, right? For me to make this point, this has to be said first, this has to be said first, there has to be this setup, so on and so forth. So there has to be a coherent structure, okay? Also, there has to be hooks all throughout. There has to be certain build-ups all throughout. You can create tension around anything, by the way. In terms of structure as well, something that really helps is multiple threading. I would write that down. Marvel, we were talking about Spider-Man, the Marvel movies like Infinity War, Endgame, the whole thing about those movies is multiple threading. What does that mean? Most logical people, when they tell a story, they're like, well, I'm going to start with my story, point A to point B, story 1 is done. And when story 1 is done, they go to story 2, then story 3, so on and so forth, right? Very linear. Instead, you want to have multiple stories going on at the same time that you can then switch between. Think of Marvel. It'll start out, you'll see 2, 3 of the heroes dealing with this situation. There's story 1. After 2, 3 minutes of seeing them deal with the situation, it cuts to story 2. And you'll see 3 other heroes, maybe on another planet, dealing with something else. Then it cuts to story 3, 2 of the other heroes in another part of the world dealing with this. Then it cuts back to story 1, then 2, back to 1, then 3, and the whole movie is just cutting between these different threads. It also hits on our ADD and our low attention span, right? Again, social media really amplifies this, where after 2, 3 minutes of seeing the same characters, you're like, I'm bored. Where's my TikTok scroll? There's your TikTok scroll. Here's another situation with more heroes. Moving around. Multiple threading. If you can do this, it will really add a lot of depth and make whatever you're saying very captivating. And it also helps with running out of things to say. If you run out of things to say, boom, jump to the back to the thread that was open. Jump to the next storyline. Right? I'll do this in content too, by the way. Whenever you see me make, for example, oh, back to the, you know, with the Spider-Man thing, that's jumping back to an old thread. Jumping in between. Okay? So multiple threading, structuring. Then there's stylizing. This means adding a certain style, adding a type of, you could say, your own authentic speaking style. What does that look like? What's your vocabulary, your word choice? Are you swearing or not? Even swearing adds a certain style, right? It's very different to, if I'm like, well, Mr. Hands had sexual intercourse with a horse. Mr. Hands got fucked by a horse. Deep up the ass. Very different, same point, right? Your choice of words. You should develop your own style of speaking that is unique to you, okay? Notice how what I'm about to do is I'm going to link this to a story to make this point hit. What's the point? You should develop a style that's unique to you, right? Here's the story. Anyone know ChatGPT? Yep. Our new ruler? If you go to ChatGPT, and you can all try this at home, write a paragraph about anything, just a paragraph of text. You can ask ChatGPT, rewrite this in the voice of fill in the blank. Any kind of public figure, celebrity, writer, you name it, fill in the blank, and it'll rewrite that text in their voice. Now, we're still in the early stages, it'll come off kind of cheesy or whatnot, but how does this link to you? How would ChatGPT rewrite that text in your voice? If you were to ask it, hey, write it in the voice of John, what would that look like? What's your unique style? Notice all these public figures, writers, celebrities, they have a unique style. What's yours? Get it? Notice how just adding that story now made that point hit, huh? You got to come up with your own unique voice. Cool, Julien. Oh, but the ChatGPT example, everything is stories. So that's the whole stylizing. And then there's imagining. That's the third. Structuring, stylizing, imagining. And that is adding graphic to it. It could be from simply embodying it. Right? Notice, fucked up the ass by his favorite horse. Rupture inside. Blood coming out. It adds way more graphic. You're like, oh, God. Right? It takes you there. So Put your body into it. That could be one. Right? Just doing something as simple as that. You see everyone's like, oh, it's like I saw it. Right? This is something I learned earlier on, no joke, by watching Dane Cook do stand-up comedy. Right? He's hit or miss now. I have actually a little side note. I saw a set he did in Los Angeles. This is 3-4 years ago. It was one of the best comedy sets I've ever seen, but the whole audience hated it except for me. But it was really good. He never put it out there publicly, but it was really good. But what's his big strength is he'll overact everything with his body. Right? You'll see him do like, oh, Dane Cook, raw, like all this crazy stuff. And for me, naturally, I like, as I hope you know, speaking with my hands. Right? This is Julien. Like, I'm a very hand speaker, so I like embodying that. But that was something that really struck a chord. I'm like, huh, a lot of his comedy, one, is story-based, but two, there's a lot of body, like embodying it in the physical sense. And you'll catch a lot of people, they do this robot talk. Hello, everyone. We're going to talk today about stories and adding graphic to your stories. And there's like, not moving, it's like a statue robot. No, loosen it up. Get that stick out your ass. Get Mr. Hand's horse out of there, right? So bring your body, bring graphic. Description, details, that's another big one. You know, if you're telling a story, everything that happened because you were there. Other people don't know. Bring those details. It makes it real, makes it visceral. Use words that also hit on the different senses. What did it feel like? What did it look like? What did it smell like? What did it taste like? Because guarantee they probably did more of those horses and bulls than that. What does it taste like? Is there a little bit of hair in front? Right? Just that. Suddenly adds a whole new layer, and it also hits on the imagination side. That's the imagining. It's like, bring the person in the story. Versus, oh yeah, and he just got fucked by bulls and horses. Bring him into it. Right? And again, any story, you can bring it to a point. I'll share with you one last one about cows. This is a true story. When I first started doing a few live streams on YouTube, there were some live videos, for some reason, just in the spur of the moment, I shared this story and linked it to the video. And I'll give you the example here. So this is a true story. When I was 12 years old, my parents thought it would be good for me to work a couple weeks on a farm. Okay, I grew up in Switzerland in a farm town, so they knew tons of people with farms. And I went to work for 2 weeks on this farm. And it was a growing experience. It was a reality expanding experience. But a few strange things happened. The first one is I did not realize how scary chickens are. For real, like I'd have to go into this coop. This is a little side note. I had to go in this coop and it was like this small thing and he's like, you got to go get the eggs, but be careful they don't try to fly up and get your eyes. so I'm like freaking out trying to get the eggs, and then the second day I went in, I opened the coop and there was like a dead chicken that they killed in there, so I had to get the body out, and I'm 12 years old. So that was the first one. But it then gradually expanded, where the next one was he took me and he had these cages with all these bunnies, these rabbits, cutest things. And he's like, Julien, look at all these. Pick one. Which one you like? Now, I thought there was a little plan hidden in that question. So I looked at the most scared one there. I'm like, that one. He's like, good choice. Takes it, pulls out a gun, a rifle, like it wasn't with bullets, but like those metal pebbles. And he's like, watch closely, Julien. Puts the rabbit down, the gun right there on the forehead, and bah, kills the rabbit, and you hear the rabbit like still scrambling dead, and then skins it in front of me. Traumatic. There's no point to that story, I just felt like sharing it. The third one, and this was the one with the cow, is I'd have to clean up all the hay and the shit, and there were all these cows and stuff, and you'd have to walk them too down the street. And one day this person drives up, and he's like, Julien, come check this out, check this out. So he takes me in the back, and there's this cow, it's like tied, and I see the guy like reaching into his bag, and he pulls out this long plastic glove. And I'm like, what's he doing? And he's like, just watch closely, Julien, you're gonna like this. And I was like, okay. And I see him, no joke, take his hand and just stuff it all the way into the cow. And I'm like, I didn't know it was possible. I'm like, what is he doing? No joke, the guy looks at me and the farmer, and he's like, she's in heat. And that's how I learned how they inseminate cows. And they took out the bull cum from Mr. Hand's ranch and just put it in there. Now I was 12. How does this link to my point? That's how deep we're about to go here content-wise. You might think we're going to scratch the surface. We're going arm's length deep. So buckle your seatbelts. Okay? Storytelling. Get on it. Go.